Well, welcome back, Water Life Debrief podcast. We are so excited to be back for episode 4 of our brand new podcast. We hope that you've been enjoying it as much as we have been. We have so been enjoying just taking away the sermons from Sunday morning and coming in here and just doing a little deep dive on those conversations. So we appreciate the feedback that we've gotten so far, and we're glad that you guys are just trekking along with us. I'm here with our lead pastor, Todd Braswell. We are just coming off of a fantastic morning here at Water Life Church. God is on the move, and he's doing some really awesome things here at our church, but just even here in our county and around the nation, and we're just grateful to be a part of it.
Indeed.
Yep. Did you have fun preaching this morning?
Yeah, it was a good service.
Yeah.
I mean, the music, everything, all the spirit of the people. It was a good day.
Yeah.
And it's a good text to teach on.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've been looking at Elijah for a couple of weeks, so I enjoyed kind of landing the plane on that one today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So speaking of that, why don't you just give us a little 30-second, 1-minute overview of your sermon today? Just hit some of the highlights there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a neat story of, here's this older spiritual leader influencing the younger generation, but having an intentional, mindset of leaving a legacy. And, Elisha has been walking with Elijah. He's been watching, he's been learning. We talked a bunch about that today, about how, people are watching us. So they know we're Christians, whether it's our kids or it's our coworkers or for the students or classmates, people are watching and learning something, either good or bad, right? So we have to be aware of that. And clearly, Elijah was laying down a pretty good example for him to follow.
Right.
And so you see in that story, when Elijah is supernaturally taken away. It's a really neat thing. It's a weird thing in the Bible. He doesn't go through death. God just says, we're done. I'm just going to bring you up to heaven. You're going to graduate to heaven. And as they did that, I love the fact that, you see Elisha in the next moment where he is, doing exactly what Elijah was doing. He's picking up the mantle. We talk about that, it's in that phrase where that little expression comes from. And he's really living out and becoming the man God wanted him to be. And God's going to use Elisha to do great things too. And I like that. But I think it all boils down to that, that 9th verse is the key verse. And I hope, if you didn't hear the message, I hope you'll go back and look at this. But the 9th verse in 2 Kings chapter 2 is the key, because it's that mindset. And he says, tell me what I can do for you before I'm taken from you. Is that he knows my time is short. I want to invest my life in something that matters. And therefore, he's living out that mindset. And if we're going to live a mindset of, where we want to leave a legacy that's going to make a difference and going to be remembered, it's going to be that aspect where we're like, hey, my time is short. My time is precious. And I want to invest my life in the things of Jesus and of other people that God's put in my path. And I love that intentionality about him. He says that, and it makes a big difference. And, you got a guy that's, that comes a great spiritual leader on the back end of that. And so I think the passage, that story today should speak to all of us, because God wants all of us to, live life for him and leave a legacy to be remembered. And certainly those of us who are parents, grandparents, that sort of thing, that's a pretty important thing. So I think it's got a lot of takeaways from us, but I just love the fact that, he's got that intentional mindset that's like, I'm going to live life for others and for God. So what can I do for you? But also that mindset, life is precious, life is short. I need to invest it wisely.
Right.
So that's a lot, and it ties in, as we talked about in the message, what Jesus speaks in Matthew 24 and 25 and other places.
Yeah. There were so many good takeaways, just even in my notes today and different stuff like that. But like you were just saying, live life for others and for God, and I think that that's something that honestly, sometimes in today's world, that just seems like it's like, wow, that's a novel idea, care about more people and care about God more than yourself. A lot of times people don't really tend to do that much. And so one of the most impactful things, I loved the whole sermon, but, you didn't give this illustration today, but it did take me back to a couple years ago whenever we were at the Palmetto Leads program with the kids and with our youth leaders that we take. We get to do that every year. And you had done the tape measure thing with them. I thought about that this morning. And so for those of you that don't know, Todd gave everybody a paper tape measure, and he said, all right, tear off part of it where your age right now, and then be realistic, but tear off the other half, just like when you think you might die, whatever. And so, you tear off at 80 years old or whatever. And then you just have this little bit of tape that's left, and just seeing that, it's so impactful. And so something that you talked about today were tombstones and cemeteries and things like that, and how everyone, we're all going to die. It's a fact of life. We're all going to die. And so we're all going to end up with one of those tombstones someday. And on each tombstone, there is a day of birth and a day of death. And in the middle of those is a symbol, and that's the dash. And so you talked about how we can make the most of the dash. And so sometimes in life, I think it's so easy for us to get so caught up in our everyday life, just the rat race of life. You're going to practices, you're going to work, you're trying to cook meals, you're also trying to be a spiritual leader of your home, and you're trying to keep up friendships, you're trying to be a good, spouse, son or daughter, you're trying to honor your parents, just different things like this. And, just every age range is kind of at a different area of life. So, whenever we think about making the most of that dash, what are just some ways that you would encourage people just to make the most of their time? You talked about intentionally investing in every day. And so there's days in that dash. And so how can we make the most of those days?
Well, first of all, I think we need to, let's talk about why people don't invest in the dash. Maybe that's a better way. Maybe we can answer the question that way. Like, first of all, I think in the culture that we live in, for a lot of us, we're just kind of ignorant at what it's at stake. It's just kind of like, we just don't even think about it. It's just like, yeah, like you mentioned, I'm going through the motions. Bad 80s song, I'm working for the weekend. I'm just, yeah, it's a terrible song. All I can see is that red jumpsuit that guy wore on the MTV video. But I think sometimes we don't really realize what's at stake, or sometimes we're taught to live in the immediacy of the moment, and we don't think about, like, hey, we might not get another moment, or because I think we live a little bit ignorant of that. There's always going to be more time tomorrow, and that's not true. You never know. We never know when our end's going to be, but also, like, opportunities have expiration dates. We talk about that around here at church a lot. Yeah. So I think a lot of people kind of live that way. We live kind of being taught to, our culture teaches us just to kind of focus on the immediacy. I call that microwave culture. We got everything now, and we just kind of focus on the moment. And it's very easy in that moment to get kind of self-centered and stuff. And so we have a consumer mindset toward life rather than an investment mindset. And I think that's the key thing, like the dash. Like, the Bible's got this great verse that says, teach us to number our days that we might have a heart of wisdom. And so the Bible's letting us know there, like, hey, this is one of those limited resources. I'm born and I will die. Or Jesus comes back on the clouds of heaven. Right. The end result's the same. Yeah. But, like, some of us will live more than others. I mean, Becky's grandmother lived to be over 100. And, my people die kind of early.
Right.
Mine
too.
And so, you talk about that. My tape measure was like this long. Yeah. And so it was a little disturbing.
But also motivating. Make the most
well,
of the
it is.
dash.
But just you're looking at that and you're like, okay, I have time is a limited thing, right? And I can't get it back. And if I wasted today, I can't get that back, right?
Right.
And so I think, a lot of us are taught with this consumer mindset, but Jesus wants us to have the investment mindset. And that's what Elijah had. Elijah had an investment mindset. And so when he's living, he's like, hey, what can I do for you before I'm taking from you? That's an acknowledgement of how special and valuable time is. Okay, that's the dash of my life. I'm aware of that. Teach us to number the days that I might have a heart of wisdom. God, you know the number of my days. I don't, but I want to use them well, because, like the parable we talked about, and I would encourage everybody to go read that parable in Matthew 25, parable of the talents it's called, because Jesus is like, look, I've entrusted you with time, talent, and treasure, right? And I expected you to be faithful and invest it. And so, like, think about time, our life. What are we going to invest it in? I mean, we keep making jokes about that, but is it literally working for the weekend? I mean, that's kind of lame. Is it just our selfish desires of, acquiring and accumulating? Because that's not going anywhere. That's not going to leave a legacy worth remembering. Or is it going to be to intentionally invest in, hey, I want to invest my life in God because he saved me, changed my life, and I want to invest my life in people, beginning at home with the people God has put in my path. So for me, I'm married. I got Becky, and I got 2 boys and now 3 grandchildren, right? And then I've got my extended family and all of that. But, like, then I've got my church family and, people I meet and people in the neighborhood and everything else. But like, how do I intentionally invest in that? And I think if you're not thinking about that, the dash just gets used up. Because, every day we're using it up. We're burning it up, right? Yep. And if I did that illustration with a tape measure every week, every year it's getting shorter, right? Yep. And so I think that's one of those things you have to understand, like, our life will come to an end, or Jesus comes back. Either way, it's the same thing. And, like, what are we going to have to show for it? That's the scariest part of that parable, is that there's the guy that that is unfaithful with what the master's entrusted him, he doesn't invest, he just buries it in the ground. And there's a real strong condemnation from the Lord. I mean, I'd rather have well done, good and faithful servant,
right?
But that really takes an intentional mindset, not a consumer mindset, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of us, we've got a sin nature that's self-centered. We've got a culture that pushes that. Culture not just pushes that, but normalizes that.
For sure.
Live for today, FOMO, whatever that, fear of missing out, I better get it today. And it's just, that's just not a good way to live. And you got to think strategically and long game. Like, what am I going to do with the amount of time that God has given me? And living for that well done rather than that, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. So, I think it's easy for us to get caught up in that. And I think for a lot of us, we're not, necessarily bad people. We just think, oh, there's already time tomorrow. And I'm just doing this today. I'll get to that tomorrow. And like, if you take that approach with our kids, tomorrow comes and they're out of the house and we didn't do what God expected us to do.
For sure.
It's a sobering thing for parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you talked about investing our days well. And, hindsight is always 20/20. And so I'm like, if anybody today listening is anything like me, there have been many years of our lives where we have just lived day to day. We've made a lot of mistakes, just living in the way of the world, different things like that. And so this morning, one of the things that came to mind for me, and you brought this up at the end of your sermon, you just talked about how it's not too late to leave a legacy worth remembering. And so what would you say, to the people, what kind of words of encouragement would you give for people who maybe up to this point, they have not, built a legacy that they are proud of? Maybe, people that are listening are someone, and I'm talking to myself here as well, but, maybe you're known for having a bad temper. Maybe you're known for just kind of flying off the handle and just saying whatever. Maybe you're a critical person. Maybe you're a vulgar person. Maybe you were talking about your friend this morning who had an alcoholic, abusive dad and all of these different things. And so, what are some kind of words of encouragement that you can give to people just to prove to them, it's not too late and you can redeem your legacy up to this point?
Well, yeah. And a couple things on that. First of all, you can. And with Jesus' help, you can do that, right? We talked about the importance of, we can't do any of this unless we bow and surrender to Jesus. So that's key number one. But the person that's sitting here today that, maybe he's looking back and like, hey, like I've had in my life, there've been times I've let good things become God things,
right?
And that's not a good thing, and I have to evaluate my priorities and things. There are times I wasted some time with my kids and things that I shouldn't have. Same thing. I mean, Becky will tell you, like when I was doing some of that stuff, I didn't see what I was doing at the time. But Becky, we've talked in later years, she said, every time you did that, it communicated to us that was more important than we were. Wow. And that is not what I intended. And that broke my heart when I heard it, but I understand how they got there. And so, that made me decide, I got to change some things. Right. And it's what you do with, when you're at that moment. You can't do one thing about what's already happened in the past. That's where everybody gets hung up. Well, I can't do it about the past, so I won't try it. Well, that's nonsense. You don't have to stay there.
Right.
God's grace and forgiveness, you move forward. It's about what you do today. So, case in point. So, Zacchaeus, the wee little man.
Yeah. Wee little man was he.
Yeah, and he climbed up in the sycamore tree. Some of us, we won't do the song today, but I like that story because, Zacchaeus, I really don't think he was curious about Jesus. I really don't think his life was empty and meaningless and he was searching for Jesus. I think he was just curious. And Jesus invites himself over for sandwiches. And there's an interesting thing, the Bible didn't give us the details of that whole lunch meeting and everything, but people are really ticked that Jesus is hanging out with Zacchaeus. But Zacchaeus says something really interesting. And Zacchaeus has lived a terrible life. He has been a professional thief, because he's a tax collector. And not only that, he's the chief tax collector, gets cut of everybody. So he makes his living extorting money of every people. Because a lot of people don't understand this, but the way it worked back then, people that were tax collectors were contractors for Rome. So you would bid for the contract, Natalee, if you were going to be a tax collector for that district in Rome, and you would pay them what you owed them. And so maybe they ask you for $10,000 for that district or whatever it is. Tax rate now, it's way more than that.
Yeah,
but anyway,
right?
But then the way you made your money is getting more than $10,000 out of the people. So you twist arms, storm, and you just kind of use your power to extort money out of people. So you're really a professional thief.
Yeah.
Tax collecting may still be the same.
Yeah, go figure.
However, I won't go on that tangent today. But I love it when Zacchaeus stands up and what he says, they're barking at him like, I can't believe Jesus is hanging out with this trash and this garbage. And he stands up and he says this. He says, here and now. I like that. Yeah, that's been the past, but here and now. He said, and it had to be, he said something that made everybody laugh. If I've stolen any money, and they laugh, that's the only way you can make a living.
Right.
And he's the chief tax collector. So he's done a lot of that. He says, here and now, if I've wronged Mary, I'm going to, pay back 4 times the amount. And then he says, I'm going to give half of what I own to the poor. But the big thing I want you to see there, and what we want to hear our audience here today is like, it was that here and now moment. He's like, I can't go back and fix that.
Right.
But I can go back and make amends. Now, he was going to make restitution, is what
Yes.
he's saying. I'm going to pay back people more than because Zacchaeus is getting ready to go broke. His priorities have changed, and that's because of Jesus. He's bowed his life and surrendered to Jesus.
Yeah.
But I like that phrase, here and now.
Yep.
Can't do anything about yesterday, but I can do something about today and going forward.
True.
Now, let me say this. It does take time, because you talked about in your question, what about the people that were used to be known for the language or maybe a bad temper or whatever it was, all these kind of things, or maybe like me, they had their priorities out of whack. How do I,
change?
I guess
like
change,
you just walk into work the next day a different person,
it's the and get people. It's the change of Jesus to do the change. However, like getting people to kind of like, see that in us is live it over time. Live it over time, and people will realize, oh, this is not just word speak. This person has really changed. God's really changed this person, and you can earn some of that back over time. But it's going to be that commitment, that intentional investment. That hey, here and now. I'm not going this way anymore. I'm going to live my life as an investment for God and for other people. And so I think anybody that's willing to do that, I think a lot of people can be pretty gracious in that moment when you see people doing that. I love seeing stories of, you mentioned my friend Victoria. I remember her telling me that story, and I didn't do it justice today because I didn't have time to go into the details. But just, I love the stories of where people get to the point in life where they're like, enough of this. And with the grace of God and the Spirit of God, they move in a different direction. Yeah. And over time, they are unable to unpack all kinds of stuff with the people around them. And they can begin to reshape that legacy, where the legacy doesn't end up being all that garbage.
Right.
The legacy is more like, this is what I was, but this is now who I am in Christ. And, that's a powerful thing. And so it's not too late. But it begins with a here and now moment. Yeah. And then being consistent with that. Like if Zacchaeus just said, well, here and now, and he never followed through.
Right.
Now I fully believe he did.
Right.
That people would, oh yeah, I knew that was just a fraud. He just said that. Yeah. But over time, Zacchaeus, his life was changed, right?
Yeah.
And so people, you can win people over, and you can, with God's help, redeem that. And because we can always make change if we've not been investing our time in our kids the way we should have. Maybe the things of God were not the priority they should have been in our home.
Yep.
Maybe for those of us who focused on our career and we're focused on consuming all that, like, hey, okay, that was then, but we can change that and stop doing that with God's help and make a change. And that begins to correct and change the legacy. Yeah. And that old bad part of it just becomes that's the before Jesus kind of part of the legacy. Which is good, and God forgives us and he moves us on. So I think that would be something. Don't just be in it for the long haul, be intentional, and here and now, I can't correct what happened in the past. There's no reason to sit here. God's forgiven me from that, but I'm learning from it, and I'm moving forward with God's help. Right. And now I'm intentionally investing and living a life for God and for others. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
And I mean, whenever you say that, and this just came to mind, but like, so if you're living your life for yourself and you're not focused on, serving and loving others and God above yourself, your legacy is just all about you. But whenever you have that moment, that's what you talked about this morning, is bending the knee and surrendering to Christ. You have that moment, then your legacy after that point, it's not about you and like what you do and all of this stuff. It becomes, this is my redemption story that was only possible through Christ, because if we depend on our own strength to change and to become a new person and to stop these old habits and different stuff like that, we are going to fall short every time. And I think that, friends that I've had in my life, whenever I've had the opportunity to talk about how God has changed my life, or whenever I've invited friends to church, and, now basically my whole family comes here with me and they've been baptized here. And it's just, I never, just become immune to just God's goodness and how gracious he's been to me. And so just sharing that with other people, you want that so badly for others, just for them to have that moment in their life. And that their story can be redeemed. That God has such good plans for each and every single one of us. But, if we're just constantly chasing, the things of the world, and we're not bending the knee to Christ and asking God, how can I serve you? How can I serve others around me? How can I make an impact in the world? Those were some, 3 of the questions that you said, Charlie, Charlie Kirk would ask himself every day. I thought that was a great point too. But, we can't depend on our own strength to change, because we'll fall short every time. We'll fall back into those old habits. And so,
well, let me say this, and the neat thing about that too. So you talk about your family coming here, and now they've been baptized and they're serving here, and I've been privy to see all that happen, which is exciting. But like one thing, we talked about earlier, that when you're intentional about like, hey, I'm going to live my life for Jesus. I love Jesus, and I don't really care if they don't like it or not. This is just what Jesus changed my life. I'm going to live for Him. I'm living in a way that honors Him. I'm not going to conform to the culture. Going to live a life built on God's word, and going to love the people in my path for God and for others. Well, as you're doing that, people are watching.
Yeah.
Now, they may completely, totally disagree with us. They don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in things. But this is what I've seen in my life a bunch, because I've run for years in the skateboard culture, not tons of Christians in that culture a lot of times, same thing with the mountaineering community and different things in bike racing and stuff like that. So I've always kind of been, it's the pastor, but what is interesting about that is I have had so many opportunities on the back end when somebody has a crisis. And it's because they were learning and watching, and they're like, okay, maybe he has something that can help me in this moment of crisis. And so it opens up an opportunity. So it's just neat how if you'll live the life, and that's not just to a pastor, man, you live that way at your work. Listen, you're living at some work where everybody's just crass and crazy and bad attitudes and all the time. You got different, like that will get noticed. Now people can give you a hard time for it too, but God will, a lot of times through that, put opportunities for really serious conversations. And I've had that in all the jobs I've ever had, not just church jobs, but other jobs where people like kind of know you're a Christian, and sometimes they come and there's a great opportunity. So, you can, God gives us all kinds of opportunity there when we do that. And if we'll be intentionally be like, hey, God's given me whatever the dash of my life is. He's changed my life. I want other people to know Him. I'm living for God and for others. So.
Right. Yeah. So you talk about people just watching you, and how you're setting the example all the time. So what are some, we talked about a lot of different things today. Like I said in the notes.
Are you saying I talk too long?
No, I'm like, there's so many good things. I'm like, we could literally sit here and talk for hours and just break down every point. It was so good. But so for people who are kind of simple-minded like me, what are some just practical ways in our day-to-day life that we can just start building that legacy? Just things that we can do to set the example for our kids, things like ways that we can set the example at work. Just what are some practical ways, things that we should invest in, things that we should stay away from, different things like that. Do you have a couple of those that come to mind for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so let's talk about the spiritual disciplines right off. And that discipline word always bothers people, but it is true. There's some things that Jesus did that He would have us do. So I think when you intentionally prioritize time with God, somewhere in the day, however that works. You don't have to be the person. If you're not a morning person, don't try it in the morning. But you prioritize time with God, time in the Word, time in prayer. Okay, those are going to be things that. And if you got littles in your life and they're seeing that, they see that's a pattern, that's a priority. Oh, Mom always reads her Bible. Dad always, is doing this, and he's teaching us this or whatever. So obviously there's those things. I think there's that focus of I'm going out the day and like wherever, whether we're, whatever our job is, whatever our roles are, okay, I'm going to live in a way that is going to honor God here. I'm going to honor God with my work and honor God in how I treat people. And sometimes the work environment can be a tough place to do that. Maybe even that way in the church work environment. Yeah. So I won't go into that.
I know, right? But, stop right there.
But I mean, sometimes it can be a challenging thing. But you go out and I'm trying to honor God in that. And I'm certainly understanding that God put people in my path. We've all got family, we've all got friends, and everybody's got good, bad, and ugly in their family, but I'm trying to okay, these people I'm responsible for. God's given me these people to travel with, and I'm going to invest some time and make sure I'm doing some concrete time in there. I think that intentional thing of God has given me this day. God, I want to honor you this day. I'm giving you this day. I always like to do that when I'm driving out of the driveway. I was kind of just stopping a little short prayer, like, God, help me to honor you in all that I do today. And if there's specific things I kind of got, if I'm up against this, or I got this thing, help me to handle it the right way. But ultimately, it's just a quick prayer of like, God, help me honor you today in what I do. And I think that's like that mindset that's kind of getting this focus that like, okay, God put me here. He gave me this day. I don't know if I have tomorrow. I've got today. Yep. I've got at least this moment. I don't even know if I make it through the end of the day, but I've got this, and God's going to put people in my path, and I've got an opportunity to stand for God, to live for God, and live for other people. And so God, help me see the opportunities, help me do that. I think, first of all, that spirit of intentionality is helpful. Now, let's talk about some things for those that are parents and things. So, obviously littles are watching and paying attention, and they're learning from us. I'm here to tell you, if we keep saying Jesus is the priority of our home, But look, everything keeps us out of church because everything's got to line up perfectly for us to get there. The kids are learning that isn't really true.
Yep.
The other thing that we always go do on the weekend is true.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people don't like people when you tell that, and people get mad nowadays and they're like, that's legalistic. It's not legalistic.
Yep.
You know, with our life, we're going to teach them priorities. And like I said, they're smart enough. You wait and see with this with Jet.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
smart. He's smart enough. Your little one. He's smart enough to figure out. They say this, but they're doing this.
Absolutely.
The doing this, they learn. Oh, that's the real thing. They're
Yep.
not dumb. I'm
Yep.
telling you, they are not dumb.
Yep.
And so, you know, they need to see those kind of intentional priorities. That hey, you know what? As a family, you know, we pray together. Pray for your children. Pray with them. Pray out loud with them. That is such an important thing.
Yep.
Read the Bible to them.
Yep.
You know, such an important thing. You know, emphasize just time with them during the day, and don't get hung up on what a lot of people do. So I'm going to set you free on this one, Natalee.
Okay.
So a lot of people get hung up on always trying to find these big moments and these big experiences for their kids, and it's that big quality time, and it's that big event. If we take them here, we really invest in our kids. Okay, I'm not discounting that can be helpful,
Right.
but it's more important just be consistent in the small things, just a day-to-day life. You know, I used to figure out ways, you know, I'd have to visit and do things in the hospital when I was a younger pastor a lot, and I'd figure out like, man, I'll just take my kids with me. And so I'd load them up, and and I'd at least get to talk to them in a car. And it wasn't this big mountaintop experience, but I was spending time with them, you know,
Right.
so prioritizing time with them, you know, praying for them. And man, partner with the church. I for the life of me, I don't understand why so many Christians take a lax attitude to church. I do
Right.
not. I mean,
Right.
and especially a church like ours that's trying to invest in the next
Amen.
generation, that's trying
Amen.
to
Every
trying
day.
to reinforce teaching your children to love and follow Jesus. Because I said that today. Like honestly, I did not pray about their grades. Their grades were way better than mine anyway. You know, and you can find out my report cards.
God's like, I'll cover that.
Well, when I found skateboarding, you can and Becky Raven.
Yeah.
My grades are down.
I love it.
But I prayed constantly that they would love and follow Jesus.
Amen.
I wanted them to know Christ and then, you know, love and follow Jesus. And so that was a consistent prayer, you know, for me. But, you know, I think you partner with the church that's doing that. Man, you're reinforcing that. And so
Absolutely.
they're also saying, oh, the things of God are important.
Right.
Right. Oh, that's what we do on Sunday rather than other things.
Yep.
You can still do things later, but like, no. At Sunday morning, we're going to church. See, those things are communicating and teaching things because they're watching and they're learning, right? So, you know, and I did bring this up, and I do think this is an important point. Remember, when you've blown it, own it.
Yes.
That's
good.
Did
That's
it
the
rhyme?
shirt of the day.
That's
Yeah.
the shirt of the day. So, or when you're blown it, own it. However you want to put
Yes.
that. But I do have found, and I've had to do that quite a bit with my children.
Yes.
And anyway, I'm not even going to go any more of that. But I've had to do that, and I think that's a great teaching tool for them because they see, first of all, Dad's a real guy, and he just is big enough to own before God and us that that's not the way to be.
Yeah.
And so I'm reinforcing like, hey, what your dad doesn't was right. Don't do that.
Right.
I'm telling you that was wrong. That was sinful. I've got to ask for forgiveness, and that was, you know, you do something else. So
Yeah, and not saying do as I say, not as
Yeah,
I do,
yeah,
and just
100%.
dismissing it. You know, you got to own it.
yeah, you got to own it.
Have that
and,
humility.
And I've just found that is a really powerful teaching tool with our children. You know, just being intentional with that. By if we own it, but look for opportunities to teach them too. You know,
Right.
teach them about what's important. Involve them in doing things for other people. That's another way. You know, involve them in serving. That's one thing we do at our church. We have serving events. We always involve
Yep.
the kids in it.
Yep.
You know, because we want them learning to live a for others lifestyle, right? So anytime you're going to go do something for the neighbor, involve the kids in it. You know, anytime you're going to do something at church that's service, involve the kids in it. You know, because it's just a powerful teaching tool that's teaching them life's not about me.
Right.
It's not about my selfish needs. It's not about consuming, not about acquiring, not about achieving. It's about Jesus, about for other people.
Right.
And you start to teach that into them. But it's those actions. And remember, each day, over time, we won't always do it perfectly. Own it when you've blown it.
Yep.
But keep pouring into those kids and just, you know, look for ways to spend time with them, do that. But let them see Jesus in you, you
Yes.
know. And, you know, and you have to explain the why with them a lot of times too. Like there have been times where I've had things happen and I knew they didn't understand what happened and why Dad just did what he did. And I'd have to go back and unpack that with them later and say, hey, the reason I said that to Mrs. So-and-so or to Mr. So-and-so, the reason I addressed that this way is they're kind of a jerk, but God tells me to act this way. You know, and so they watch these things, but they don't, but you're helping them connect the dots. You're kind of unpacking the faith for them. So any of that stuff is helping them see that legacy. But the more they just see you loving Jesus, and I don't mean I'm just mean loving the Lord, being thankful for the Lord.
Displaying
when you're doing
the fruits of the Spirit,
yes, when you're having a prayer and you're just like, God, thank you so much for my children, our family. Thank you for the food. When you're diving down on that, you're just really creating in them like, hey, this is important to mom and dad, and you're just pouring into them a lifestyle that says, hey, I want to know and I want to love and follow Jesus as well. And that's what's so cool in the story, because I love that. A great example is in the story today where I love it. Elijah has just said, hey, what can I do for you before I'm taken away from you? Like I've got this limited, like, how can I live that for God and for the lifestyle? So I love that. But then I like what Elisha says next. Elisha is like, hey, I want double what you've got. Like, I've been watching you, I've been seeing you, I see God in you and what God done in and through you, and I want that and more. I think, how great is that? Like, what if our kids would say, hey, I see Natalee, Jet says to you, I see mom's faith, and I want that and double.
Right.
Man, what parent wouldn't want that?
Absolutely.
And so I love that, that was passed on to that generation.
Yeah.
And I think that's that, he was watching over time, seeing what God was doing in and through him, and he wanted that. And I think for all of us as parents and grandparents and just people in general, would want our friends, neighbors, kids, grandkids to have that kind of, man, I want double that. And, and you see him learn exactly, and he starts following that same thing, because he does the exact same thing. He saw him take the mantle, the cloak, and put it in the water and part the water, and the first thing he does is he parts that river. And that's just such a cool thing, just the handoff of the
and then other people saw it, and they were like, the spirit of Elijah is on him. 100%. That was so other people were watching.
And then he dealt with rebellious teenagers who were making fun of him being bald.
Yeah. And something else that I want to hit on, just again, as you were talking, and with me having an 8-year-old son, and like growing up, I was in the church, but I wasn't really in church. Like a lot of times you'll like tell Bible stories. Sometimes on Sunday morning, it's like, we all know the story of so-and-so. And I'm just like, actually, I don't. I'm 28 years old. This is my first time hearing this. And again, no fault of, my mom or anything like that. But I just didn't go to Sunday school or anything like that. But nowadays, with kids, there are so many resources to help disciple them. There really are. And like for Jet and I, we had this little, it was like the Minnow Laugh and Grow Bible or whatever. And he loved that. And he knew like every night before bed I would...
Is it the King James Version?
You know what? It's not. No, actually it's
good.
I know. The way, thank you. The way that it walks through, it was just so, it was so easy for him to apply, and it opened up good questions and stuff like that. And so now, we walked through that entire thing, and it's kind of like a storybook Bible, but now we've gotten something, and it's like making the Bible easy for kids or something like that. It's not that you like want to make it all about entertainment, or you just want to make it easy. But like you said, it has to be something that they can understand and that they can apply to their life. And I'm telling you, whenever you hear them, it's so exciting. Whenever you hear them asking those questions, and, they're just like, their eyes are just being open to these things. And it's like, let me explain to you, how that works and why God did this certain thing and different stuff like that. And so there's so many good resources. And Ethan will tell you, because with him being the kids director, he is like all over all of these podcasts and books and stuff. But there are so many resources out there, and we'd love to share those just with families and just that are leading and discipling their little kids.
Well, remember, and go back to the practical thing, and we touch on a lot of good things today, but like Jesus has got that verse where he's like, even a cup of cold water given in my name, has, it makes an impact, and it has a reward. Well, think about it, just the little day in and day out things where we're loving Jesus and loving our family and walking through life with them and, spending time with them. Like, there's value in that. Do it over time. God's going to bless that. It's going to raise up the next generation to love and follow him and partner with the church in it. Good grief. Amen. Partner in the church with it. But there are just so many things out there to help us. But I think we'll never get there if we're just not, we've got to understand, God, teach me to number the number of days. The dash. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I need to be intentional.
Yes.
I don't have tomorrow. That's not guaranteed.
Yep.
What am I going to do? How will I live in the dash? If I want to leave that legacy worth remembering, where my kids are going to love and follow Jesus, I'm going to impact my world for Christ, because that's what he calls me to do. Well, then I can't mess around with that. I've got to hey, God, I need your help. I can't do it without bowing the knee to you day in and day out. But also, I've got to think about that, and I've got to invest my time wisely, because that's the most precious resource we have is time.
Yes.
And so how are we going to spend it? What are we going to do with it? And thinking that long game, man. Like, if you're a parent, you want your children to love and follow Jesus. Look, what a terrible thing if you focus on other things to give them sporting events and dance events and education, all this kind of stuff, but they miss the most important thing and depart into eternity without Christ. There's nothing worse than that.
Amen.
Right? And so it's like, be intentional about that. Obviously, the other things are important. Nothing wrong with that. But
when
remember,
you make a good thing a God thing.
Right. And say no to some good things, say yes to the best things. But as you do that, man, that's what we want for kids. And so, be encouraged. The little things you're doing along the way are making a difference. And it's not too late to start. Remember, leaving the legacy can start today, but it's the choices that we make going forward. It's the Zacchaeus moment, here and now, here and now. I can't fix that, but I can fix what happens today with God's help and go forward in a different way. And God can, God's a God of redemption. I love that biblical word. And, a legacy can be redeemed, and a bad legacy with God's grace can become a good one. So,
absolutely. I love it. Well, it's so good. Like I said, I know we could sit here and just talk about this forever, and I'm so excited just to be walking through this series. It has been so good, and just walking through Elijah's story and just bringing life to that story and making it applicable to our life today. It's been awesome.
Yeah, and where we're going next, though, we're turning the page next week. We're starting to move into time of God lets the people be judged and lets the Babylonians and the Assyrians take them over because all this shenanigans. And so we move into people like Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach and Abednego. I call them Shad, Mad, and Bad. And we're going to do that. But next week, of course, we got Chad Robichaux going to be here, so spread the word about that's going to be great. But then that's where we're moving into that. So I'm excited about where we're going with that, and we're going to officially turn the page on the Old Testament, entering into the New Testament on the Sunday before Christmas. Woo-hoo. And with Jesus' birth, and we'll be preaching through the Gospels, and then a little bit of Acts and the book of Revelation, which people seem interested in, so we're going to look at that. So we got a big year planned here at the church, and also, as we get ready to wrap up, let me say this, because this is just in the news some, and I've been reading some about that. And Natalee, I don't know if you've seen this, but they're just, in Nigeria, there are a lot of Christians that are being martyred by Islamists over there. And, the Bible talks a lot about the persecution of Christians, particularly in the last days and things. And, man, there's a lot of, people across the world, particularly in these Islamic countries, where your faith can get you killed. And we need to be in prayer in that. I know our government's starting to rally the saber, like, hey, y'all better put a stop to that. Right. Which I'm thankful our government would be willing to take a look at that and use its pressure to, get a genocide of Christians stopped. But we need to pray for that, for the Nigerian church and those believers there who are in the face of that.
We take it for granted, the freedoms that we have here every day, just 100%. To be able to walk into this building and to worship Christ openly and freely every day. And so definitely praying for those families, everybody affected by that.
Indeed.
Yep.
Indeed.
Awesome. So. All right. Well, we'll see you next week right here, same time, same place, and we hope that you have a blessed week.